Amanitoid because it looks like an amanita. Anytime you use the term oid at the end, it just means it looks like that. All right? May or may not be correct. You know, it's almost a wiggle word. You know, so you're not really necessarily naming the genus, but it probably is. But it might be something that looks like that genus. This is the gematoid. This is the starfoot. So this is in section Validae. All members of section Validae are edible after being cooked. All of them. Okay? There's there's concerns with hematologic blood. There's toxins with bloods, all right? That the blushers in particular, this isn't a blusher, that the blushers are known to do, and they've done tests on lab rats, but they're all like intravenous, you know, they're really pumping this stuff and nobody's really eating them and metabolizing them. So that toxin actually destabilizes when it's cooked, first off. The temperature of your stomach is actually above that point where that stuff degrades. So you will see reports on this stuff that's actually intravenous, like concentrations of this stuff, because they wanted to see what this does. So even with toxicity, it's subjective. You know, the more you know about the subject, you can make more informed decision. This is not a blusher. This is a starfoot. This is Amanita aestivalis. I mentioned my favorite tasting Amanita to date is Amanita aestivalis. Only the upper stem, though. And where's my disclaimer? She's gone.
Ran away.
I can't recommend anybody go home and start eating Amanita after today. All right. Those of you that know who I am and been out, understand that I eat Amanita, so it's hard to be hypocritical. I also know what I'm doing. All right. You make a mistake, like the toxic one. If you ate it, think it was edible, and you started feeling those effects, you're gonna get scared. What did I just eat? How did I toxin myself? You're gonna run to the ER. Or in worst cases like this one, this looks just like a destroying angel. I'm just gonna throw this out to the untrained eye, and that's the one that will melt your liver. Okay? And again, my favorite excuse me. My favorite flavored tasting Amanita. A lot of you would think that this is a destroying angel, which will kill you. Okay, so just the expertise. This whole genus, you mentioned it earlier. You know Amanita, and you know enough to stay away from it. That is the best mentality to have. Everybody hits a milestone when they go into it, and typically everybody's milestone is Validae, because we know, or Kaisaria, the Caesars. There's no dangerous Kaisers, and there's no dangerous grisettes, section vaginata. So you're talking about 600 species right there. Okay. You know, that are toxin free, even more. Anyways, back to the aestivalis. We call this the starfoot. So it doesn't have the saccate base like on that one. I mean, it still pops out of an egg, but the design of the material breaks away in a point, and it does have a bulbous base, which is very characteristic of Validae, having this bulbous base. And when we say bulbous base, there's different shapes. Section Roanoke ensis, I'll call those X-leps for today because Lepidilla has been broken up. Have rooting bases. They call it turbinate, like a turnip or a carrot on a lot of these, you know, which is a characteristic. The Validaes have this globose, you know, bulbous base, and that just means the width of the stem and the width of the base is larger. Section Kaisaria doesn't have that. The width of the stem and the width of the base are parallel and even. Same with the grisettes. You know, once you start dealing with these small characteristics, you know, you can rule a lot of things out. Especially the Kaisaria, when people are so Kaisaria looks very similar to section Phalloideae. It has this sac on the base. It has a skirt. You know, they can be white or they can be putrid green. Amanita spreada is the hated Caesar because it looks so similar to the death cap. If you were to cut it in a cross section to see the shape of the base, Amanita phalloides has a bulbous base. It will there's no always or never, but it will always have a bulbous base. Amanita spreada will never have a bulbous base, okay? Back to the aestivalis. We call this the starfoot with this bulbous base because as it matures, you'll notice it has these clefts, these little chisels, these little canyons, which is very characteristic to the starfoot. We have more than one. The white one we consider aestivalis. Depending on who you talk to, some people call this Amanita brunensis variation, pallida, or pallidium. Pallid means white, the white form, the white variation of brunensis. That's a touchy subject I don't want to get into, but I call this Amanita aestivalis. But this is in series Mappe, okay? All members of Series Mappe have a unique aroma, which smells like raw potato or radish. And I mentioned asking about edible mushrooms. I like this group because they actually have that flavor to them. It's not just a bland mushroom that you're using for body, but you also have to pair it accordingly. That radish doesn't go with everything. All right? So characteristics of this, it does have a skirt. And unlike the short gills on that one I mentioned were truncate, if you look at this, if I can find some, these are truncate too, don't worry about it. These splotches, the blemishes on the cap, rather unique. Now this can happen on Destroying Angels as well. I call it an acid stain splotches, but also very characteristic to aestivalis. And since they're close in similarity to blushers, you'll also notice handling this, you'll see the stem has this kind of red coloration. And we'll get to the blushers, but not like the bolete that turn blue right away, or the paxilis that turn brown on the gills right away. Blushing is very subtle with a lot of Amanita. Some is very instant, so it's variation, but it does have a skirt. And we can note the margin of the skirt, if you're looking on this, has a light discoloration. So it is marginate. And this has to do with that reddening property of this particular mushroom. Sometimes it has remnants of the warts on the cap, sometimes it doesn't. But often, the same material, those warts, also have this reddish orangish kind of coloration. And whatever slug or bug kind of ate these holes in, if this went another day or two, you'd start noticing the damage around the ring is also starting to turn red. So another characteristic, obviously you got to dig the whole Amanita up. Like I said, if you cut this on top, it's going to be very difficult because the key characteristic is the star foot, hence its name. But if you need to see the shape, always cut a cross section. This is a two-dimensional depiction, all right? So you can see the actual shape. If you were to draw this on a piece of paper, it's going to be more difficult to draw this to scale versus drawing this to scale, all right? And then we can physically see it's wider at the base right here. This whole group I mentioned in Series Mappe smells of radish or raw potato, okay? And as I mentioned with aroma, you either want to cut it open to get some fresh flesh, and if there's any question or it's ambiguous, take a little bit and crush it under your nose. Once you pulverize it, exhale deep and take a big deep breath in as you're pulverizing it. Everybody should smell